All right, this is the Vanaheim Vibes podcast. I am Chloe Tart, your host. With me this month is Hilary Ayer. Um, Hilary, I'd like you to go ahead and introduce yourself. What would you like to be remembered for, and what would you like to be known for?
Um, Goodness, I am Freyaswoman. I hosted to her something more like 25 years ago. Now I come to think of it. Um, I'm also a seidkona, uh, an elder out here at least, um, a poet. It doesn't really be relevant to all of this, but something like 20, something like 30 years I've been teaching improv in various uh, things like the Dickens Fair and the Renaissance Fairs. And since ours is a religion with homework, I've been studying Freya and other beings.
Excellent, excellent. And it may not be relevant to the conversation we have, but it may be relevant to you to be remembered in that way. So if you feel comfortable opening up and telling us about that, I'm perfectly fine with it.
Okay.
Um, So I want to go ahead and get into your history with heathenry first, and then more into the Vanir and Freya second. So what brought you into this path?
My friend Diana and my friend Kitty, several other people uh, and oddly enough, the strangest thing was I was a Cub Scout den mother in Berkeley, and the person that I first talked to about heathenry was at that point maybe 8, and it was Ian Gray, who was one of my Cub Scouts.
Oh wow!
We have this thing in Cub Scouts where you're supposed to talk about do you know and follow the religion of your home? And he was explaining which gods he felt most attuned to. It was an interesting conversation with the Cub Scouts because I got things like when I'm with my mother, I'm a Catholic. When I'm with my auntie, I'm a Jew. I got we don't really do religion. So finally, I had to uh, re- revert the conversation to how do you know when you're going to be a good person? My other path to heathenry was that when I was a child, I took imaginary journeys with Thor and Loki. What I thought were imaginary, anyway. And looking back on it, it's hard to tell. Um, but I took,
I was gonna say that sounds like beginning shamanism,
you
or
could
at
say
least
so.
journeying, at least.
Beginning journeying, I will certainly agree with. Uh, because what I was reading was Gailey's Classic Myths, which is mostly the Greco Roman. And there's some nice stuff in there too, but the ones that really appealed to my imagination were the journeys to Jotunheim and so on.
And for me, for my journey, I kind of had a similar calling as a kid. Um, every time I saw Norse references in books and in my in my generation video games,
Uh-huh.
it always called to me and always pulled to me for some reason, and like always being pulled into that. When you were dealing with that as a child, did you have a similar feeling of that pull?
About what was the,
Oh, did you feel a pull as a child towards those
oh,
myths?
yes, I did.
Okay, okay, and as you got older, as you had those conversations, it must have come apparent that this was the path for you.
Yes, it took a while. I went through all sorts. Well, I was literally a hippie in the Haight Ashbury in the late 60s, okay? And there were a lot of paths open. And I wound up studying Gertrudeism, going to the OTO, uh, studying thaumaturgy, And finally, but all the time, the beings that would talk to me, and a teacher of mine who was not at all Norse said, if your gods won't talk to you, you don't, if your gods won't talk to you, they're not worth, they're not worth bothering with. Uh, and the ones that talked to me were mostly Norse.
And it seems like that seems to be a very common thing on our path, is that all of us seem to be in one form or another called to this.
Yes.
And it's understanding that calling, because I'm fairly new to the calling. I've been hearing it as a child, but I didn't answer the call until I was 41 or until I was 39.
Uh,
So I'm still wrapping my head around it, as Rob Shriver would call it, a mind shift into heathenry. Um, so for me, it's a matter of like, how do I navigate that mind shift at this age? And it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's always been there.
yeah.
And that
Well,
seems to be a common thing, is that it's always been there for a lot of people.
yeah. I did divagate for about 19 years into Egyptian, which has some similarities and also some severe contrasts. Um, but one thing in common is, though I oathed to Freya, uh, it's not like the Abrahamic oaths where you sort of give over your will. To Freya, I said specifically, I will do what you ask of me unless it's something I feel wrong. And so from time to time, I get urges like, invite him to this. Uh, I'll tell you that story in a little bit because it's kind of interesting. Um, invite him to this. You need to pick up that child that just fell over. Buy me this. To which I have learned I have to say, I would love to buy this for you. Please create the money that I can do that with, because I've always been, well, poor.
I know that feeling, especially walking down the New York fashion district and the New York jewelry district. Oh yeah, she gets real
Yeah,
noisy.
yeah. And the other one I've had to learn to say is, I'm driving. I will not talk to you right now. Sorry.
Well, it's funny because like in a moment of driving for me, um, when it's later at night, when there's no one on the road,
Uh-huh.
and you maybe not for you, but we put the music a little loud, and you get into an almost sathe trance state where you're paying attention to the road, but you're also, you and the road have become one. And it reminds me of that story of Freya looking for Other, and on those night rides looking for Other.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like one of those things that we could possibly get in touch with Freya through those kinds of through those moments.
Well, at 80, which I just turned, um, I need to focus on the road.
Definitely. I guess that's one of those things of youth that I need to be very mindful and thankful of.
Yeah, and one of the things about youth is, there's a lot of wonderful stuff you can do, uh, but the energy, the content of the energy will change. And often it will change so gradually you barely notice it. But when you first notice that something causes you effort, or that something is, quote, not as fun as it used to be, pay attention. Uh, moving in the stages of your life, you can learn different ways of being and different, what, you get more rather than less in tune with the gods, but it's a different tune you're playing.
Right. I'm no longer in touch with. I'm like, for me, it's a matter of looking at Freya as the host, Freya as the leader of the house.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I'm reaching that point in my career where I am being asked and being expected to lead.
Yes.
So no longer am I the frontline warrior, looking to potentially go to Folkvanger, being of the first picked. Now I'm the general behind the lines, and I have to let the next generation. And I'm in that point where I'm watching the next generation come up, which is why it's so important for me to have this conversation with you, because I'm reaching that point where I'm going to be expected to make those decisions. Um, and from my perspective, what I believe that your perspective is ultimately useful for and grateful for, and I'm humbled by, is that there's so much experience in life behind it. Um, I just want to make a better, more interesting choice um, of the choices I have available to me.
Yes.
Do you feel like we are making those interesting choices, that we are making that progress?
Um, yes and no. Um, my generation had to make some choices that your generation will never have to make because of ours. Um, I'm talking about political and societal changes. Um, I would have liked to have been non binary, what I now know as non binary, but as a teen and young woman in the 50s and early 60s, this was simply not a choice that was available to me. Um, in fact, being female uh, and accepting myself as a person with brains and ability was fought against, shall we say. Uh, I went to an all academic high school and I went to UC Berkeley, and I was constantly being told to step back, um, and not getting into classes that my then boyfriend, who was just as bright as me, but I don't think any brighter, he was getting opportunities I wasn't. Um, but then there are so many ways to come to an understanding with the gods that eventually you realize that that persistent, well, that's not the question you asked me though. Uh,
It
you,
opened. I'm sorry. It opened you up to something beautiful, and I didn't want you to stop. So
okay. Well, your generation needs to remember that my generation opened doors for you, and to not shun those doors just because they are not expressed the way you would express them. Uh, for example, we called it open marriage. You call it poly,
polyamory.
yeah, um, or open relationships. I used to have to go around in the hate when I was in my teens, saying, "I believe in free love, not free samples." Does that
Oh,
sound familiar?
that's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, feel free to borrow it.
Oh. I am. I will take that as a gift, and I have to give you a gift in return. This is how it works in our religion.
This what?
I have to give you a gift in return. That's how it works in our religion.
Yes,
So I'll figure that out and find some nugget of wisdom for you. And uh,
that would be delightful.
um, but yeah, understanding that those doors were open for me um, is primarily um, is primarily why I'm here. It is primarily to make sure we honor those doors. And I want to make sure that you feel heard on this.
Okay.
Um,
It's not so much you honor us because, after all, we're going to die too and go do the next thing, whatever it is. Um, but you have to understand that some of the insights we had are still relevant to you and should be listened to. That would be honoring it.
Perfect. Getting that onto recording, getting on that on the record, I think is going to be very important. Because then we can at least point to it and say, hey, this is what we need to do. We need to be mindful and we need to remember. And
Okay.
and I think that that's going to be ultimately good for us. Um, so specifically with Freya, you mentioned when you mentioned your struggles um, that you were always fighting for yourself. You were always fighting for your right to be there at the table.
Yes.
Do you feel like that is like that fight is something that those who are willing to make that fight attract Freya, or does Freya, or are we called to it because we're dealing with Freya? Which do you think is the relationship here?
Goodness, that's a good question. Well, I work a lot with Mardal, that aspect. And to that, I take searching. Um, I take the whole searching for oath as being an aspect of Mardal. Uh, the weeping pearls in the ocean and amber on the land, that part. Um, so, in a way, it's both things at once. You are called and you become more attractive, and so you get more calling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like entering a gravity well. You just
Very
start
much. Yeah.
sinking into it until you're very suddenly not just sinking anymore, but screaming, hurtling at it.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so, uh, where was your first introduction to Freya?
Uh, Goodness, I'm not sure. Uh, okay, I never felt, and this was one of the things that was a problem for me. I never felt that sexuality was bad. I never felt that um, sticking to one person was required. Um, though I've always felt that you have to be respectful of the needs of your primary, but your primary also has to be respectful of your needs. And I was bi, but not in. I had a friend that felt being bi meant always having a male and a female lover. I always felt that it meant accepting either, but being true to the one you were with. Um, but as I was working the fairs and so on, we had uh, zero feeling that if you wanted to and you were busy, if you were 1,000 miles from your home and there was a person that attracted to you and they understood your situation as being not looking for a permanent relationship, uh, fine, go make whoopee. But I came into that aspect of it through some friends who are Gardnerian and used to do the rituals after hours at fair, and it was sort of like this is right, this is right, this is almost right, this is not quite right, but it's interesting. You know that feeling?
Yeah, they're the when like I've been in participant of a number of Rob's rituals,
Uh huh.
and that feeling of like, oh, this is right. This resonates with me has happened so many times that it's no longer like special to me anymore.
Yeah.
But I know that exact feeling, that exact like. this is clicking, this isn't, but this is
Yeah.
the exploration and this mind shift into this new way of being.
And some of the now I can participate in other people's rituals uh, wholeheartedly because I don't feel that this is not my primary path, but that my gods kind of enjoy an outing in me. Um, one of my feelings, okay, one of the things I do in Save when I'm not the seidkona is I usually have questions about lore, which I will ask at Save if we get a time when there's no persons needing to speak right now. I'll ask a question about something that interests me or that I'm, having some problems understanding. Like example, a long time ago, I worked on the notion of sacrifice, and in fact, I brought it to a Pantheon panel and asked other people how they handled it, and their responses led me to think, okay, I won't sacrifice anything but myself. If I want blood, I have blood. I use my blood. I don't do it very often, but it took me a while to work through that. And asking for other wisdom is very useful. And I had an experience with Freya. Well, here's another thing I'm jumping to something that I think is meaningful, but if it's too far, jump, ask me back. Um,
Will do.
I asked, I was feeling very sorrowful for Freya because I actually love her as if she were a very, very senior member of my family. Um, and I was feeling sorry for her for that searching and weeping. And I said, I don't understand, but it makes me sad. Are you still doing that? And what I got was useful, but it didn't get recorded um, because of computer glitches. Um, sort of that there are three different levels, and there's the level on which the gods are the beings from the myths, and on that level, they're constantly repeating and reassessing their myths. Um, then there's the ones as we talk to them, and they come from different levels of their myths. For example, when I was losing my stepkids because of divorce, uh, I talked a lot to Mardal. When when I wanted to talk about uh, being a sexual being, I would talk to Freya herself. Uh, the whole is Hetha and Freya and uh, gosh, where's my name? The lady who burned herself, the young one. Um,
Kolveg?
yeah. Uh, the question is, are they the same? Yes and no. Sometimes I work with one of them. Sometimes I work with all of them. Uh, I think our understanding of the gods is not sufficient to know where the dichotomy is. Okay, and the third section is the level at which the gods themselves relate to each other and to the multiverse, if you will. Um, and that is something we really can't understand. But trust me, she said, we are continuing to evolve.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get out of the gods. I've said it before, but like the closest I've gotten to Thor has been coming home drunk on an Uber driver who kind of, long red hair, kind of shaggy beard,
Uh-huh.
very nice guy, got me home.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the gods are keeping up. Who knows?
At one point, my friend Ember got into conversation with a sailor, an older sailor, very blue eyes. Basically, she thought she had been having a conversation with Njorth, and I don't have a problem with, you know, sometimes we have conversations and they're not us that are talking, and that's fine with me as long as I'm not advising them. I got in trouble once because somebody asked me during a say if they had accomplished all the things they needed to accomplish before they could suicide. And my answer was, yes, you have, though I wish you wouldn't. But the trouble I got into was, people thought I should have dropped everything and done counseling. Um, I believe it's people's right to do that, to commit suicide. I just would do anything I could to keep them from it other than forbidding them. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, like how could we be the ones to decide who lives and who dies?
Yeah.
And
Uh,
and who could really judge another person for their decision to do it?
and since I was in Say, that was
Right. It was not what you were expecting. It's like how do you drop Sade? Like that Sade state is powerful,
yes,
and just dropping it is like I don't know, running and then coming to a full stop and not expecting yourself to hit the floor.
yeah. I would have expected the guide to stop me if need be, but there were well, you know who Elisheva was? Elisheva Nesher.
I'm sorry.
Elisheva Nesher. Do you know who she was?
No.
Okay, she was a Jewish heathen, Jewish pagan, pardon me, from who believed back before patriarchy, and she has some very interesting books. And she was a friend of ours, and she came to a lot of Pantheacons. She has passed now, and but she was also a psychiatrist. And one of the things is she a couple of times when she came to our says identified people who are in PTSD and talked to them privately. Sort of like, would you like to hear this? Because this is what I'm seeing. And she was in that. So if she didn't stop me, and she had every right to, um, I think I was still on the. Anyway, I got on the right track. But so there have been problems, but because the God's notion of what we should do, I mean, I personally don't want to die right now because I'm very fond of my husband and I'm fond of my work. But, you know, uh, I don't think it's going to be the end of things. I think I'm probably going to well, I've been told I will go to Folkvanger um, till I'm ready to come back if I want to come back. Um, that's another thing. The Norse notion of reincarnation is along the family line. I don't have any kids, though I've affected any number of younger people um, between Ferris and my stepkids and so on. Uh,
I have a similar question for myself as well because I also did not have children.
yeah, yeah. And my feeling is that it's a lot more voluntary, that you get reincarnated if your family line has messed up. Um,
Oh, I got to take care of this one.
yeah, yeah. Uh, but I think it's also going to be uh, if it's voluntary, if you see a time or a place or a need that you can choose to go back. But from what perspective and from what kingdom you make that choice, I don't know.
So I want to go ahead and since we got onto the discussion of sorry, I have to mute. I have to burp. I am so sorry. That's going to get edited out. I am so sorry.
That's okay.
So speaking of Folkvanger, of that, because I think that I really do think that the lives that we interface with, that we influence, do become our ancestry.
Okay.
And I do think that those family lines, even though they may be cut at our branch, may come back on other branches.
Yeah.
So like I know that my cousins had a bunch of kids. I know that my relatives have had a bunch of kids. I figure there's probably still a chance, one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just don't know what choices there are going to be when we get there. I think that we're going to have multiple choices, multitudinous choices even. And I think that our gods will make us responsible for our own choices just as they do in this life.
So Orlog would still matter even in the afterlife, or maybe even more so.
Uh, yes, but to quote Shakespeare, the fault is not in our stars, but in us that we are underlings. We will always have the choice, but it'll be hard sometimes.
And it's really on those choices that we really do define and discover ourselves, do we not?
Absolutely.
And it's really under that, like, because what I want to get to, and what I think I'm getting from your story with Freya so far,
Uh-huh.
has been a lot of self determination, a lot of you saying, "This is who I am. This is what I'm doing."
I hadn't
And
thought of it that way, but yes.
I'm sorry,
Go on.
you haven't thought of it like that.
No, I
Oh,
just did
because
it.
but it just seems to me like Freya, from because from my perspective, what I get out of Freya's work with Freya is not that I get her will, but she tells me that I should be me and do what I need to do to meet my problems in the here and now. Freya may be, helping you go left when you need to go left and go right when you need to go right,
Uh-huh.
but it's really seems like that self determination, that mindful self determination, not just I am going to do this, but I'm going to do this because it is good for me. It is this. It is that. It is this considered choice that I am making in life.
Yeah, with the proviso that that also involves uh, my rights and responsibilities as a member of society, or at least as a member of the community. Uh,
Right. It's a. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, that's okay. I was just stuttering for a um, clarification or a segue.
Ah, so because ultimately, like, what I don't want to do is, you know, in my path with Freya, I don't want to ever have to say, you know, what should I do or what do I need to do? I should be. I feel like what honors her and what honors her strength is to ask instead, um, how can I do this? What is the boon that I'm asking? We should be asking for should not be for Freya to handle our problems, but for us to have the insight or for us to have that go left, go right, make this move, but make it from yourself
Yeah, yeah,
perspective.
yeah. There will be intuition, but and information, but there will also be responsibility for what you do,
Right.
your own deeds, whatever they are, no matter how you think you're guided, are you are responsible for.
And it really is on that note that I would like to go ahead and start wrapping up the episode.
Okay, well, I have one story for you.
Oh,
Which
perfect. No, no, no. I just want to go ahead and the wrap up will probably take about 10 minutes and then another 5 minutes after that. Um, but I did want to ask
Sure, go.
one last question before we got into that story. Um, so the thing that I really want to know is when when we do make that self-informed decision, that is that decision we make into the world, we should be confident in that decision. Even though we might get it wrong, even though this might be the wrong decision to make, we can't do it with hesitation, can we?
Oh,
Like we can't do it second guessing ourselves with hesitation, can we?
I get your question, and I have to agree with two things. One is no, we have to go for it and not hesitate. Two is we have to be self critical enough to know when we've made an incorrect decision and go back and fix it. Or if you can't fix it, at least acknowledge it.
And I think knowing because there's a uh, because there's a bit of Jewish thought that has it's something like in one pocket I hold the scroll that says that for my sake the world was made for me, and then in another ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Hmm.
And it's a matter of knowing which one to pull in what moment.
Agreeable. I would agree.
It's a matter of knowing, okay, I am responsible in this moment, or is that a agreeable take on that?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Now let's go ahead and finish off with your story, and then once we get the story, I'd like to go ahead and get your song recommendation.
Okay. Um, my uh, okay. I used to have a job sitting in the lobby of the public health department, directing people and also doing various kinds of work. Another employee of the public health department noticed my pendant, which at that point was a jade naked woman, and on the back, "Goddess be my guide." And he referred to it as the titty goddess. And I said, "Well, that's not incorrect, but it's not all she is," kind of. And he used to come up to me and say, "Okay, explain to me why Easter should be considered heathen." He really did say that. And I kind of said, "Who do you think Easter is named after?" That kind of thing. Um, so he died, and he died for love. He fell for a lady who's this was in inner city Oakland. He fell for a lady who had a boyfriend who felt that she belonged to him, and the guy stabbed him.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, and he died. And so I started hearing him speak to me, and he said, "Do you think the titty goddess would accept me?" And I said, "Well, you died for love, and you died and you asked her. I would think so." And so I prayed for a while, and I was pretty convinced he'd gone on. But she doesn't always do what we expect her to do, but sometimes she comes through so nicely.
Oh, that's beautiful. Like I think that that is those moments where it is undeniable an echo of someone has come back,
Yeah, yeah,
and sometimes it is our duty to reply to that echo and be kind to it.
yeah,
Awesome. Um, and I know that you said that your music tastes aren't really modern, aren't really whatever, but it seems to me like there is probably a song in your heart that is related to Freya, and I don't care what it is. I would like to share it with the world.
okay. Well, it would be it was started as a folk song written by Ewan McCullough and Peggy Seeger, and then it was recorded by, I don't know if you'd call her a rock singer or a blues singer. It's called "The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face."
I will get that added to the playlist.
The first time ever I saw your face, I saw the love bloom in your eyes, and the moon and stars were the gift you give to the dark and empty skies. That one.
Awesome. We will add that to the playlist.
Way cool. Just a second. Marshall, do you happen to know who recorded that song?
Which sound?
The first time ever? It was a black lady singer, but
The song's called The First Time Ever.
yes. We are checking
Oh, awesome.
because
Roberta Flack.
Roberta Flack, yeah, she recorded, and that's probably the easiest way you can find it.
Well, that's 1972. However, Peggy Seeger in 1957.
Yeah, Peggy Seeger recorded it in 1957 when she wrote it. Roberta Flack recorded it in 1972, apparently, and it was something of a hit then, so it might be easier to track down.
I'll probably use the Peggy Seeger version only because it's the one that you wanted.
Okay, well, this is Peggy Seeger, the sister of Pete Seeger, the daughter of Charles Seeger, who was a folk musicologist in the 30s and 40s and 50s. Um, I really like the folk memories in folk music, which, okay, use whichever version strikes you as valid. Anyway,
Awesome.
anyway, there it is.
All right. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and close out the episode. This has been Vanaheim Vibes. I've been Chloe Tart. You can, if you want to go ahead and reach us, go to everheartempire.com and join our Discord, and we should be good to go from there. All right, everyone, have a good day. And remember, I truly otar o singur.